different categories of thinking, because it's cognitive, right? Cognitive therapy, which means therapy for your thinking, right? So there's two thinking sicknesses, if you like, that can lead us to this. One is reactive thinking. Reactive thinking. And I have an example of that. But there's a lot of forms of reactive thinking, and the second one is irrational beliefs. So these are the two big categories: reactive thinking and irrational beliefs. You see on page 2. Okay, so those are the two categories. The first category of reactive thinking, do any of you identify with any of those reactive thinking? Which ones kind of come up for you? This list of reactive thinking.
Jumping to conclusion.
Oh, jumping to conclusion, really common one, isn't it? Yeah, we can, like on very little evidence, we arrive at a conclusion. I always talk about my friend who we were delivering her. She had never been through San Rafael before, and we delivered her to the bus depot in San Rafael we lived in Nevada. And she was telling us afterwards that, boy, what a dump San Rafael is. I certainly would never want to live in San Rafael. And so how did you arrive at that, Susie? Well, she came down Lincoln Avenue to the bus depot. I mean, that's hardly some sort of representative section of San Rafael, you know. So, I mean, we do this all the time, and we wind up going around with, I mean, people, you know, my father-in-law one time back in the 1920s had yogurt, back when they called it yogurt. And he never ate yogurt afterwards because he ate it back in the 1920s and it was awful tasting stuff. I mean, you know, it's like, this is, I mean, the world is full of people who are, you know, arriving at conclusions about things on such flimsy or outdated evidence. You know, my father, the first time he bought a car that didn't have a crank, was just terrified that it wouldn't start. You know, I mean, because he grew up with Model T Fords, you know, and to buy a car that didn't have a crank where you could, in the case of a need, you know, get out and actually crank it. You know, I mean, so I mean, we have all kinds of silly, you know, thinkings that. Completely. I mean, this man was terrified driving this car because it didn't have a crank. What happens if it stops and I can't start it? I mean, it's you know. So we, but what? Yeah. So all or nothing thinking. All or nothing is one of them, like seeing things in black and white categories. You know, love it or leave it. You know, in other words, people have no room for grays. And you know, they don't realize that that's infantile. In childhood development, one of the stages of development is when children stop and move away from good mother, bad mother. Good mother, bad mother is she's good when she's gratifying me and she's bad when she's somehow delaying gratification. And they go from good mother, bad mother, black and white. It's called splitting. And there's adults going around who are just fixated back in an early stage of childhood development. They cannot see that there are shades of things that. One of the terms for in childhood development is called you become a container of greater complexities. You are able to handle more complex things, more complex ideas. F. Scott Fitzgerald, who wrote The Great Gatsby, There's a new movie of Gatsby, incidentally, that I don't know if it's any good or not, but it'd be kind of interesting. But F. Scott Fitzgerald said, one of the symptoms of a first-class mind is what? It can contain two opposing ideas at the same time and not feel frustrated by it. So somehow a lot of us have this all or nothing emotional reasoning. What's emotional reasoning? Did anybody ever suggest to you, maybe it's the way you're feeling? Do you think that's affecting the way, no, that has nothing to do with it. This is objective fact. Everything is going to hell. Right? People are trying to cajole you out of a mood, right? Yeah. And you go, no, this is actually how it is. I'm really seeing things clearly now. You really are as bad as your mother said you were, or whatever, But so, and the next day it's like, oh God, I'm just embarrassed. I was so, and please don't believe what I said yesterday, Overgeneralization is what you had said. Labeling. What is labeling? Huh?
Placing a tag or a name on somebody,
yeah.
Knowing.
Or yourself.
Or myself, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a loser. I'm a loser. Or I'm stupid, right? I am so stupid. I mean, you hear this all the time. Oh, I am so stupid. That's the kind of negative thinking that, how are you going to feel if you're telling yourself you're a loser?
Like a loser?
You're going to feel you're going to feel hopeless and depressed, right? Why bother? Fuck it, right? You get a case of the fuck it's, right? So, disqualifying the positive, that's sort of like what we were talking about before. Somebody's trying to talk you out of that negative mood you're in, and they're trying to remind you about the good things you've done. Well, you're really good at this. Oh, it doesn't matter. It's like you're just determined to be negative, right? And so jumping to conclusions is sort of like generalization. Then catastrophizing. Do any catastrophizers? What would be a catastrophizer?
It's just all going to absolutely fall apart, no matter what.
Yeah, it's just, yeah. It's sort of like, I sometimes think that, there's always a boy in 6th grade, who comes in every morning and he's got, oh my God, there was this huge wreck out on the ferry, all kinds of people killed, and of course it turns out there was a fender bender down the street or something, and I always kind of think that they all go on to be television newscasters, like, those teasers, diseases you don't even know you have, tune in at 11, Yeah, well, this is catastrophizers, and the whole idea is to get, oh my God, maybe there's something wrong with me I don't even know about, better catch the 11 o'clock news, see what Michael Hatton, whatever his name is. Okay, so some of the examples are kind of given in or an example of some of the ways of thinking. Do you see that on page 3? And it's kind of like taking, do you see on page 3, the example? The guy comes home with perfume on his shirt, right? Do you see that? Are you looking at page 3? Yeah, okay. The example, the guy comes home with perfume on his shirt. You see that one? Yeah. Okay, and so how would you jump to conclusion if you were his wife or girlfriend?
Make an excuse?
Well, what does it say?
He's seeing another woman?
He's seeing another woman. Absolutely. You come home from an AA meeting, and I often have perfume on my shirt, and my wife kind of knows about it now. But you can jump to conclusions But if she jumps to the conclusion, he's seeing another woman, right? And so, how would she feel about that? very angry. Well, then you can take that, those thinking errors even further. If you run with it, what does this mean? He's seeing another woman. It's awful, it's a catastrophe, right? So then you're afraid. And divorce is the only option. You're really angry. You're going to get him for everything. Then I'll be alone forever. And then you're sad. And then I'll be depressed and miserable forever. So, of course, you're depressed and miserable. So, we can take a chain of negative thoughts and just run with them and drive ourselves into this. We can screw ourselves right into the ground with depression and negative thinking just by a whole series of negative conclusions that we go. And so the next part, you see the section then, questioning the assumptions. Okay, what evidence is there of this affair that he's having, right? There's no evidence. There's perfume on his shirt, and she's like imagined, right? She's jumped to conclusions. And then, even if so, would that mean that it was a divorce necessarily? Not necessarily. And who said that if you were divorced, you would be alone forever, right? I mean, and who said if you were alone forever, you'd be depressed and miserable? You might get cats and be really happy, I mean, but you know what I mean? It's like all of these kinds of like dire conclusions and the dire feelings I am going to be having, So you can see how our thinking can really drive us into the ground. And I know that, I'm trying to keep this a bit light, but it's very, very serious for us. And we can actually just be sitting somewhere, and our mind, if we're not careful, will tip off and go into one of these old patterns of thinking that drive us into an old pattern of depression and hopelessness and not caring about anything. And really what we're doing is we're setting ourselves up then for a relapse. Right? Coming then to the irrational beliefs, I think these are fairly clear. Like if I have the belief that I'm not enough, you put in whatever enough you're not. What enough would you put in? I'm not what enough?
Lovable enough?
Not lovable enough. What did you put in? I'm not what enough? Happy enough? Well, yeah. As far as like a characteristic of yourself. What about you?
Attractive.
Attractive enough. I'm not attractive enough. Then you can see how when something happens, right, and you set up a comparison between yourself and someone, I'm not, attractive enough, or I'm not this enough or that enough, so that when something or other happens, I feel inadequate, I feel a failure, I feel rejected or fearful, depressed, ashamed, guilty, whatever. So you take your pick of whichever ones of those. And this is like how you might use these sheets ongoing as far as like trying to see what kind of ways have you in the past tipped yourself over into negative feelings that resulted in feelings of hopelessness and depression and, leading up to relapsing. Because there's some precedent for that, right? If I put myself into that condition of, as it says in page 24 of the big book, for reasons yet obscure, we seem to have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower has become practically non-existent. When you're in that state, your willpower cannot be drawn up to protect you from relapse. So what's extremely important is that we become sophisticated enough about our own process. We're intelligent people, right? We're called Homo sapiens, right? What does sapiens mean? That's our species, right? Homo sapiens. What is sapiens? Wise. Wise. Sapientia means wisdom. We're the wise. We're supposed to be the wise ones. That means that we're supposed to be sophisticated enough that we understand our processes, our thinking process, our feeling process, and what they can result in. And if I'm walking through life with no sophistication about that at all, I'm a child, or else I'm somehow not engaged in my own life. And an awful lot of what goes on for us that is negative is because we somehow haven't had that ball drop that makes us adults. And what an adult has that an adolescent does not have is the vivid realization that this is my life and I better know how to manage who I am. That's an adult. We're not our parents' kids anymore. We are supposed to be Homo sapiens, wise people who know how and are vigilant and astute enough to be aware of these things. There's some of the other beliefs. It's my job. If any of you are going through life with it's my job, how many of you have been the caretakers of your family? And right, you've been going through that, and if anything bad happens to your family, it's your fault. You know, I know a guy whose young teenage brother who was like a star athlete. And this is somebody, Mike and I both know him for years. I mean, and the year his brother was supposed to go to college, he had a full scholarship to college, he committed suicide. His brother has never really gotten over that, and it's about 30 years ago. Because he felt it was his job to take care of his brother. And somehow he's going through life. Bob has a great story about how responsible you felt about your dad, right? I mean, we feel it's our job to prevent bad things happening to other people, particularly in our family. And when something bad happens, we feel like a failure. We feel we're useless, we're guilty, we're ashamed, we're depressed. And then there's another one on page 6, which if they knew who I am, if any of you are going through, that's sort of on the other side, right? Where, you know, you go into the restaurant and you have a reservation and they say, your table will be ready in about 20 minutes. I have a reservation. I know. But it's like, I shouldn't have to. I have a reservation. You know, we can get that sense of entitlement sometimes. It's like, you know, you should, what was it, what's the actress name? Witherspoon? Reese Witherspoon. Did you see that the other day? You may not have. Her husband and she were driving home from dinner or something, and they got pulled in he was drunk driving. And the cop tried to get her to stay in the car, and she wouldn't, while he was giving the husband a sobriety test. And she finally got out and went, "Do you know who I am?" So he put the cuffs on her and put her in the police car. I mean, but so you know, sometimes we're going through life feeling I shouldn't have to do what they do. I shouldn't have to get up in the morning and go to work like everybody else. I shouldn't have to. You know, I should be special. I should. you know, we have these kind of, I'm exceptional. I should be treated with consideration by everybody. You know, no, we're just ordinary human beings. Some people will treat us with consideration. Some people are going to just not know who we are, and they're going to treat us ordinary, you know. And anyway, the page 7 is what I call the pivot, and that is where you challenge the beliefs. And we did this before. You know, who said you weren't clever enough? Where is it written that it's your job to take care of everybody? So ways of challenging these beliefs you have about things. You know, and if somebody did call you a loser, who are they to call you? I mean, what do they know, right? You know, and a lot of us have